Hello everybody, it is Carol Garrison with Carol's Creative Escape. It is time for another Make It Monday. It is Monday, April 8th, and if you watched my video last week, you are aware of the fact that I was sharing the new Simply Zinnia suite of products, which is an online exclusive product, and it's just so gorgeous and so springy and everything else. And one of the things I promised last week is that I was going to show you different ways to color the zinnias to give you a feel for just how you can get them to change in appearance. And so tonight I've got a card that I'm going to be sharing with you that's basically a basic white card, and I'm using those coloring techniques to show off one of the stamps in the Simply Zinnia suite and kind of give you an idea of what each technique looks like. And so that's going to be my focus tonight. We'll get to that in just a second. I hope that everybody had a great weekend. We were kind of busy Saturday just getting some stuff done around the house, and then my daughter came over and we had dinner and taxes got done for her. And then Sunday, my son and his wife and granddaughter came up. My granddaughter, not his, came up, and looks like Zelda's joining us here on screen tonight too. Anyhow, came up and repeat with taxes dinner and that type of thing. So it was fun to get to spend a little bit of time with Cece yesterday. And we did actually move some of our spring furniture out on Saturday. It was a very nice sunny day. Yesterday we had a lot of rain. Today we had a lot of rain. We certainly weren't going to see any of the eclipse up here just because of the clouds and things that we had going through. So by now, a lot of the demonstrators have received their new catalog. I've got mine. I'll show you the cover because that's all I can see. And it is a very different cover than what we've had in the past. It's also a much thinner catalog. And as you get it, Zelda, I'm going to take you off the table now. As you look at it, you are going to see that there are some differences in how this catalog is laid out. Instead of having separate sections just for things like dies or stamps or punches, everything's kind of commingled with products you're going to use together. And it's getting mixed reviews. People have different opinions on it. And I know my first time through, I found it a little difficult maybe to find. Whoa, sorry, my phone just fell off my stand. You know, I found it a little difficult to find things just like anything else, but give it a chance when you get your catalog and, you know, take a few minutes to go through it. And I think after you go through it a couple times, you're going to see that it starts to make a little bit of sense for what is in there. And so I am just going to jump in and flip my camera over. I cannot show you the inside of this beautiful catalog yet. If you've got a demonstrator, make sure you reach out to them so that you can get a copy of the catalog. If you don't have a demonstrator, feel free to reach out directly to me and I can make sure that you do get a catalog. And for anybody that has ordered from me, you will be getting a catalog in the mail. I should say in the last 6 months, you will get a catalog in the mail. So let's go ahead and give me a minute here to flip things over, and we will move ahead from there. For those of you that were in areas where you might be able to see the total eclipse today, did anybody get a chance to do that? I think it would have been kind of cool to see that. I know we had a little eclipse party for some of the people that are in the resident buildings where I work. And so that was kind of fun for them. Our activities person made a kind of a party out of it. So that's always a good thing to share something like that. So let me just double check my Facebook page. I want to make sure that the video is popping up. There it is. And I have quite a mess going here on my desk. If you could see it, I've got stuff kind of all over the place. So one of the things I wanted to start out showing you is this, of course, is our current catalog, and I can show you the things that are inside of it, unlike our new catalog. But the products that I'm sharing with you tonight will be available. Part of it is our blends, which you've heard me talk about. And then tonight I'm also going to work with the Stampin' Write markers. And just like our ink pads, these come in the different collections: neutrals, brights, regals, subtles. I'll try to get a closer up of that. And it's 10 markers to a pack. And then we've also got our watercolor pencils here. I admit I haven't fully updated my watercolor pencils, so I specifically picked the colors that you can get in either one of the packages that we have available. And then the other thing that I had to do was make sure that I had markers, color pencils, and blends in the colors that I was going to use for the card tonight. So again, I'm using the Simply Zinnia stamp set along with the Simply Zinnia dies, and I'm focusing tonight on this stamp set and of course the die that cuts it out. I also once again brought in that embossing folder, and then in addition to that I'm using this sheer ribbon, and it's the one that's got the silver edge. This will be available again for us. And then for my sentiment, I am using the Happy Birthday from the Biggest Wish stamp set. This is one that will be retiring, and I honestly didn't use it as much as I had planned to, but it's also set I'm going to hang on to and not sell because I do like the simplicity of it. So I do not have a card finished tonight, but I have 3 cards started that we will be finishing tonight. And so the first one that I want to show you is using, like I said, this is what I would need if I was using my markers, is this collection of stuff. This is what I would need if I was using blends, just based on the card that I'm making and the flowers and the stems and the leaves. And then this, actually, I need to correct myself. This would be what I'd have for markers. I had my blend pen stuck in there. And this is what I would need with my colored pencils. So, altogether, it's quite a bit. But if I were just doing one technique, it's not quite so much. So don't be overwhelmed with everything that you're seeing. Remember that it's just a way for me to show off a couple different color techniques. And that was really the purpose of my video tonight. So I am going to start off with giving you measurements for the card that I'm doing, and then we will take our different approaches going here. So to start with, I am using the thick Whisper White cardstock, and the reason I'm choosing to use thick is because I'm not going to have a lot of weight to it. I don't want to add another inside piece, and so that's just where I'm going with it. It's 5.5 by 8.5, scored at 4 1/4. And then I've got a piece of 4 by 5 1/4 basic white, the regular cardstock. And this I did run through the 3D Zinnia embossing folder. And I think last week I used it with the raised, and this week I'm going to use it with kind of the indentation side of the piece of paper that I embossed. I'll show kind of so you can compare the two pieces together here and see what they look like. And I'm going to go with this way on my card tonight. And then I've got little bows that I made with the sheer ribbon. I kind of pre-did those. And then finally, I've got my zinnias that I have cut out. And I think for coloring purposes, I'm going to start with the colored pencils. And with this one, I've used Real Red and Pumpkin Pie. And so I'm going to come in this time and use my Daffodil Delight, Melon Mambo. And then for the greens, I'm using Garden Green and Old Olive. And when you're using watercolor pencils, you can use the painter brushes, the water paint brushes, or you can use the blender pen. And honestly, I prefer the blender pen, especially when I'm working on cardstock. If you start to work on watercolor paper, then it makes more sense to use those water paint brushes. But that's just my preference right now, is to use the blender pen. When I actually first started using watercolor pencils years ago, the technique I learned was using the blender pen. And so that's still kind of my go-to on that. So what I'm showing you tonight is the blender pen, but beware that you could also use one of our water painter brushes with it. Okay, so I am going to show you how I do this. I think everybody's got their own technique. None of it's right, none of it's wrong. I'm going to see if I can possibly zoom in, but I don't think I can get any closer. So I'm going to leave my camera alone, and I'm going to show you what I do. What I find for watercolor pencils is when I want it to go darker, I have to press harder, you know, add more color to my cardstock. And so you're going to see me, well, you're not going to be able to tell, but my table might be shaking just a little bit. And I find that that's what gives me the intensity of the color. So I've just taken my Daffodil Delight and I've colored that in. One thing with the blends pens is you do need to have some scratch paper around, and you always want to make sure that there is no ink. It is a clear thing. You want to make sure there is no ink on, or no ink on it, and then just kind of color over your space. And what this does is it smooths it out if it's a single color, or it can help you blend the colors together. This, I used my Memento ink, or excuse me, my StazOn ink for the black color. And the reason I did that is this does have a little bit of alcohol in it, so I didn't want it smearing the ink. And then I'm just going to come in with my color pencil, and wherever there's lines on the stamp, that's where I'm going to color really dark. And I am pressing fairly hard wherever I see those colors. It's not precise, and it doesn't need to be right now for this point. Excuse me. But I am pressing down. That doesn't convey real well, I don't think, on the camera. But again, I want this to be kind of where my shading comes in. And then for me, what I find works best is to just come in now where I want the light color and go in a circular motion to fill in most of the white space. You don't have to fill it all in. The reason I like to go in a circular motion is I find it blends in a little bit better when I go over it with the blending pen. Excuse me. It just gives it a slightly softer thing. You can go back and forth in lines if that's what tickles your fancy. It doesn't really matter. I'm just letting you know why I do what I do, in case this is the first time you've ever seen watercolors. And like I said, I learned about watercolors kind of as the start of how I was coloring a lot of my stamped images way back in the day, probably even before I was with Stampin' Up. And that's kind of my go-to default when I'm working with it. So again, I'm taking my blender pen and just making sure none of that yellow ink is there. And I'm going to start where I've got my really dark. And then you kind of pull your ink out, just like when you spread it in the lid of an ink container. So first I'm getting where I know I want it dark. And then I'm just going to work my blender pen. And you do want to be careful. This is where you need to stay in the lines to add the color. And like I said, this just gets rid of all the lines and does intensify the color as I blend it a little bit. And you can tell I really did go light on my coloring for the light part. I don't know if I can get it to focus here. So right in here, but it's coming out darker like that where I've already gone over it with this blending pen. And I am going to do the same color in each of the flowers that I share with you for each of the coloring techniques, just because I wanted it to be as consistent as possible. Now, if I wanted to go back and make some of these flowers darker, I can take my watercolor pencil and go right back in and, you know, just add some circles. It is going to kind of spread a tiny bit just because it hasn't totally dried on the surface. But that would be how you would add a little more color or detail to it. I found I could get a lot with the orange. The pink is a little more intense. I had a hard time getting the red to be the intensity that I wanted on that. That is actually real red on the color pencil. And that was true even, you know, as I pressed down and colored a little darker. It did not seem to change the intensity. So that would be my one comment, I guess, about the watercolor pencils, is it might not be as intense or as dark a shade as you're used to getting out of the other options that we have available. And then to do the stem, I was working again with the colors that I had that are still current and would be available in the sets you'd get. So I've got Old Olive and Garden Green. So I just took the Garden Green and kind of did over some of the lines to get my color. And before I added my olive green, that's when I came in. I hope I cleaned that. That's when I came in with my blend pen and sort of went over these items or these areas. And then I came back with this Old Olive colored pencil and filled in the blanks. And again, you don't need to go to the edges when you're using your watercolor pencils, especially if you're using the paintbrush or the blend pen, and that is because it will allow you to drag color right to the edges. So just keep that in mind. And so with these two colors, you can see it. You know, a little variation in the leaf colors. I definitely would not have liked it had I done it all Old Olive. So I do like that the Garden Green adds that extra pop of color. I think of all the things I've colored today, that this color combination gives me a closer look of watercolor on the leaves, perhaps. And so that is what it looks like when you are using watercolor pencils. It's very simple to use. I kind of find coloring sometimes to be a little bit soothing for me. And so I would encourage you, if you have never done that before, give it a whirl. Just make sure that you're using watercolor pencils. Regular pencils will not blend and work as well with that blend pen. Sorry, my brain was not pulling the word up. So then next I am going to move to the blends, and with this one I stamped with Memento ink, and the reason I stamped with Memento ink on this one is because I'm using the alcohol-based blends, and so I need to use a non-alcohol based darker colored ink so it doesn't smear when I'm using my blends on it. So let's go ahead, and I tend to start with the center when I'm doing flowers and work my way out. The nice thing about blends is the colors really don't run into each other unless you drag the color over, but just out of habit, I start. And I am using the dark Daffodil Delight for the center, and I'm not too worried about making that two-toned or anything like that. For this final flower on here, I'm going to be using my light and dark Melon Mambo pens. And then I don't have Garden Green. In fact, I don't believe Garden Green is even available in blend pens or blender pens. And so I'm using my dark and light olive green 4x flowers. So again with this, I always will open my blend pens off to the side because every once in a while a little bit of the alcohol will pool up and I don't want to ruin my project. So I just open it up off to the side. I do recommend that you use your blend pens on some kind of scratch paper because the ink will soak through. And with this, just like I did pressing harder with my color pencils, I'm taking my darker blends pen and just going over where the stamp is telling me it probably should be a little darker because it's got all of those lines in there in this particular stamped image. So I'm kind of letting that guide me. I am not artistic enough to know all the nuances of shading and which side of things should be dark or light. So for me, I just color till I'm happy with it. And that's fine if you color like that too. Then I'm going to follow up with my light Melon Mambo pen. And for this one, I think I actually do prefer using the wider tip of my blend pens. I don't know why. It does create problems sometimes when I'm doing delicate areas, but I'm going to go for it on this one. And because of that, I am going to go carefully around the edges before I start coloring the middle, because that makes me feel a little bit better. And you know what, if you go out of the lines a little bit, who cares? And then I'm just going to come back and color up to and through where I've added that darker color towards the center. Sometimes it shows up more than other times. And quite frankly, I'm thinking my Melon Mambo and Real Red look very similar, but I can assure you they are two different colors. And so I'm just going to come back with a little bit of the darker. And maybe I can just add a little bit more shading. And what I did for the leaves is, again, I used my dark version of the blend pen along some of the lines. Let the stamp tell me where I needed to color. I think in some ways this is quicker than using the watercolor pencils, simply because I don't need to come back in and do that layer above it. I am going to use the fine tip end, mostly because these leaves are pretty fine. And I know I won't have the control to do the stem with that broader brush. But you are able to see some of the shading that I've done using this darker pen. And so that adds, whoops, see there I went off the edge. We're just going to ignore that. I do like the blends for coloring when you want to do the shading and stuff, because it doesn't take a lot of extra work to do that. These colors are definitely more vibrant than what shows up on here, with the exception maybe of that orange, but there's definitely a difference between the Melon Mambo and the Real Red, more so than what's on here. So just things to consider when you're trying to figure it out. So we'll get rid of those, and now I'm going to bring my markers in. And I think you're going to see that the markers by far and away are going to give us a more intense color. But what they aren't going to do necessarily is give us a whole lot of difference in shading. Again, it's not a right or a wrong. It just is what it is. And so you have to use your coloring tool based on what you're trying to get. So again, I'm going to go right in the middle here to color the center of my flower with Daffodil Delight. And then I will come in with my Melon Mambo marker. And I think, just like the blend pens, we've got a wide end and a narrow end marked by those rings. I am going to actually use my wide-barreled end. It's kind of a gutsy move because I only just recently got this color pack of markers. So we're just gonna go real careful along the edges. Even with the markers, I do prefer for wider areas using the wider barrel end of the pen. It's just my preference. To me, it feels more like a paintbrush, and personally, I don't think it shows the lines quite as much. I will take that away because I don't think we need to worry about this soaking through, and I think the coloring might show up just a little bit better. Like I said, with the Stampin' Write markers, you don't get quite the ability to shade. You really will depend on the darker lines in the stamp set to add any shading, and the colors are more intense. And that surprised me because I kind of thought that the blends would give me the darker color. So I was a little surprised that it's the markers doing it. I have not used my markers in a really long time. One thing that you can do with markers that you can't do with the blends is you can write right on the stamps and it will wash off just like an ink pad would, whereas the blends will stain and not come off. You can do it, you will just stain your stamps. So you have to be aware of that. And then again, I'm going to use my garden green to add, and I'm using the fine tip here because I don't want a lot of intense color. And I'm just going on some of the lines. So you really have to decide what you're looking for in your final product when you're determining what color technique you're going to do. But I would encourage you to try all of them because you may find either something new or something that you've never done before that you really do like. And I go through phases. Lately I've been using blends a lot more, but having played with my markers here, I think they may be coming with me when I do my next craft outing, and blends may get left behind. I have not used, we do sell pastels. I have not used pastels in a very, very, very long time. And when I did, it was usually with a very fine tipped brush that I could kind of scrub into the pastel chalk and brush onto my images. So I can't give a lot of feedback on that because I have not done it. But I think you're going to find that you just might need to get some of these markers now. And this leaf is a little bigger, and so my lines are starting to show. So I am going to switch the end of the marker just because I don't want to have heavy lines where I've filled in the different leaf parts. And so there you go. here's my flowers with the markers, and you can see it's fairly intense. I think I like the colors on here the best. This is with my blends. And again, with my markers, I used the Memento ink. And then here it is with colored pencils. So let's go ahead and assemble this card real quick, and you can see the difference. I know this isn't my typical video, but I appreciate all of you that have tuned in tonight to see what I am creating here. And I hope that I've encouraged you to try some different form of coloring technique, whether it's the colored pencils or markers or something different from what you've done. And if not, maybe you'll give it a try down the road and remember, oh yeah, I remember watching that video. So before I attach these to the front, I am going to stamp Happy Birthday on the inside of each of these cards using Melon Mambo ink. And I've got my fingers crossed that I do a decent job of stamping the first time through, because I don't want to have to cut more paper here. I am looking for my... Remember last week when I said how messy my desk was? It hasn't gotten any better this week. But I've got my piercing mat that I use to stamp when I'm using the clear stamps here. And so I found when I was practicing with this, it was easier for me if I stamped the birthday part first and then followed up with the happy. And I'm going to put this just kind of right in the center here. So there's my birthday, and I will come back in with the happy above that. And I'm going to be happy if it's pretty centered and straight. And I'm pretty happy with that. So let's set that aside to dry, and I'm going to repeat on these last two cards. But I do appreciate each and every one of you that take time out of your schedule to watch my videos. It just means a lot to me. I do this really because I want to share the love of stamping and creativity and just show people new ways of doing things. I learn best by watching other people, and I'm hoping that I can inspire some of you in the same way. All right, let's do birthday. If you remember me talking in my last video too last week with the Zinnia set, I talked about all of the snow that we got. Thankfully, that snow has all melted. And in fact, we've had 2 days of rain. On Saturday, when the weather was nice, we got a couple of our patio chairs out so that we could sit outside, because it is supposed to get nice this week. And we also hung up the rain gauge, so it's going to be interesting to see just how much rain we gained here. All right, I do try to clean my stamps off as soon as I'm done for two reasons. One, I don't want to stick any of my finished product on top of my stamps, and I'm kind of notorious for doing that. And also, it does minimize, if it doesn't sit on there too long, it'll minimize some of the staining that can occur. Red inks in particular and the blacks will stain your stamps. For me, I don't care about that because it actually sometimes helps me see where I'm placing the stamp a little bit better. If that does bother you a lot, you could first stamp it in Versamark and then stamp it in your colored ink, and that will keep most of the ink off of your stamp, but eventually it's going to get there. So that's totally up to you. All right, we have just a little bit of assembly to do here. I'm going to get my seal out, and because this is a 3D embossing folder that I used, I'm going to I want to make sure I put it on the right spot, add a little bit more seal than what I would do. All right, I've got that centered. And I'm going to kind of do this assembly line styled so that I'm doing the same thing every step of the way. All right. There we go. And then I am going to put each of these on dimensionals, just because I think it needs a little bit of pop. And I tried to have everything ready to go. But as you might not be surprised to hear, sometimes I misplace things. And I think I'm going to use just a little bit of this edge. And I just tore it in half with my fingers. You can cut it too, to fill in those smaller areas. I don't like to waste a single piece of my dimensionals. So I will go out of my way to use every little piece. All right, and this is my watercolor one. And so I'm just going to pop this on top, and that is really going to be my focal point. And we'll come back and repeat with this one. I really like this embossing folder. I want to try doing some coloring on it and see what happens. I've got one technique I want to try. I'm just not sure this is the right one to do it with. All right, last but not least, I've got my markers here. So again, we're going to put our dimensionals. And as you can tell, I might be kind of picking specific ones that I'm pulling off so I can get this other edge piece to put in the leaf. You could also use mini dimensionals for those little pieces. And we'll put that one here, and then seem to be missing, oh, there's my third ribbon. All right, then let's grab some mini glue dots here, and I'm just going to put the ribbon here. I felt like it needed a little bit something because that's awfully white, but I didn't want to overpower it with anything very colorful. Oops, I don't think it came off. Definitely for the pop of color, the markers have the most for kind of the depth of the shading. The blend pens offer the most, and the watercolors just add some fun ways. But like I said, these two look fairly similar. So we've got markers, blends, colored pencils. Let me know in the comments which one you like better. I'm curious to see how others think about it, or what others think about the three different styles. So thank you very much again for taking time out of your schedule to watch this video tonight, as I spent a lot of time coloring. I really do appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. And next week, actually not next week, but the beginning of May is when our new catalog goes live. So over the next couple weeks before the end of April in that new catalog, you are going to see me featuring some of the stamp sets that are retiring, giving them kind of a one last hurrah. So you can look forward to that. Thanks again, everyone. Take care and have a great week. Bye-bye.